This week we're looking at a couple of verses from 1 John chapter 4, paying specific attention to the interesting logic and grammar that we'll find in those verses. So you may want to pause and read verses 7 through 21 of 1 John chapter 4 and then come back and pick up from there. Welcome back. So to set the stage, this is the passage that talks about God being love. God is love. If you don't know God, you don't know love. If you don't know love, you don't know God. And if you understand the love of God, it will result in you loving others. That's the thrust of the passage, which brings us to the first verse we're going to look at today, verse 11. So it says in verse 11 from the ESV, "Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another." So immediately prior to this verse, it says that God loved us so much that he gave his son as a propitiation for our sins. That's the basis for this claim. And then he says, "Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another." Let's break that down in Koine. Agapetoi, ehoutos, hotheos, agapesin hemas. So, agapetoi, beloved. All right, we can set that aside in the vocative plural, beloved. If a, houtos, so, or like this, hotheos, God, agapesin, loved, hemas, us. So there's the first half of the verse. Beloved, if God so loved us. Now, I want to point out something significant. We have a first-class condition introduced by the if. First-class condition is assumed to be true for the sake of discussion. So we're assuming that God so loved us. But the real important thing here is the word order. Notice that right after the if, we get the so, the houtos. This is in the emphatic position telling us that it's not just the fact that God loved us that he's bringing into consideration. It's the manner in which God loved us. If God so loved us, if God loved us in this manner, then he brings us to the second part of the condition, the follow-up. And let's take a look at that. Kai hemes ophelomen allelus agapon. So, kai hemes, also we, ophelomen, we should or we ought, allelus, one another, agapon, to love. So, we also ought to love one another if we recognize, that's the condition, right? If we understand the manner in which God first loved us, the response to that, the follow-up to that, is we also ought to love one another. He says that's the logical fulfillment of the condition. If God loved all of us, because the we's and the us's are plural, right? If God loved all of us like this, we also ought to love one another. Then he's going to stress the practical effect of having been so loved in the next several verses, and that brings us to verses 19 and 20. We love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. So these two verses introduce something that's not consistent with that ought of verse 11, right? If we've been loved by God in this manner, we ought also to love one another. Then he says, if you claim that you love God but don't love your brother, and you've not really seen God but you have seen your brother, that's inconsistent with the ought, because that same God loved your brother the same way he loved you. In the same manner that he loved you, he loved your brother. So how can you claim to love God and not love your brother? Consistent logically, right? Good stuff, good stuff. Now we go to our main focus of today, verse 21. And this commandment we have from him. Whoever loves God must also love his brother. So look what John did. He took us beyond the issue of logic and introduced it as a commandment. This commandment we have from him. So let's look at the two parts of the verse. Kai tautein, tein and tolein, ekomen, op autu. So kai and or also, tautein, tein and tolein, this commandment. So tautein is this, tein and tolein, this commandment. So this commandment, ekomen, we have from him, op autu, from him. So what is the subject of this clause? Logically, it sounds like the subject is this commandment, but grammatically, the subject is we, that's carried in the verb ekomen. We have. What is it that we have? Tautein, tein, and tolein, this commandment. So the commandment is the direct object of the verb, and the subject of the verb is we. We have this commandment. Then we have op autu, genitive of source, telling us from whence cometh the commandment. From him. So he gave us a commandment that we still have. We hold on to this commandment. And then what we're left with is the question, what is this commandment? Which brings us to the second half of the verse. Hina ho agapon ton theon agape kai ton adelphon autu. So hina here is critically important. Hina normally is in order that or so that, and sometimes it's just used as that. And here it's probably best just used as that, because this is an appositional hina. It is answering the question, namely what or namely that. So we're told we have a commandment. What commandment? Namely or that, ... and then we get the rest of the commandment, right? So this appositional hina introduces the specifics of the commandment that was referred to in the first half of the verse. What commandment? This commandment, namely that the one who loves God should also love his brother. So look at the next phrase, ho agapon ton theon. So ho agapon is the present participle from agapao, I love, and it has the article in front of it. Here it's the generic article, the one who loves, whoever loves, one who loves, or the one who loves, either way, right? But so this is introducing the notion that anybody who says that they love God, back to verse 20, right? If you say you love God but don't love your brother, you're a liar. If anyone says he loves God but doesn't love his brother, he's a liar. Here we have the content of the commandment that we have from him. The one who loves God is obligated, should, agapa in the subjunctive mood, should also, kai, tonadelphon autu, love his brother. So that is the commandment, namely that the one who says he loves God should also then love his brother, because that same God loved both you and your brother. So the love that you have for God should also manifest in love for your brother. So there's an implicit condition here, logically, not grammatically, okay? If A, then B. So let's take a look at the implicit logical condition. Ho agapon ton theon, the one who loves God, A, if that applies to you, then B, agapa kai ton adelphon autu, he should also love his brother. So if A is true, then B should be true, okay? If you look at yourself and you say, ho agapon Tom Theon, the one who loves God. Oh yeah, that's me. If that's the case, then B follows logically. You should also love your brother. So this grammatically and logically is kind of wise and beautiful. If you claim that you love God, then you should love your brother. Why? Because that God loved your brother the same way he loved you. And you haven't seen this God that you love, but you clearly see the brother that's right there in front of your very eyes. Wise and beautiful. Great verses. I encourage you to go back, verse 7 through 21, read it through in a single sitting, and just drink in the logic of John's argument for loving the God who is love, and consequently, because of having received the love from that God, loving the brother who's right there in front of your face. Great stuff. Hope it was good for you, and if it was, please like, share, subscribe, leave me some feedback in the comments. Let me know what you think, and until we see one another again, Charis Kai Irene Humin, grace and peace to you.